Welcome to qnawire.
All right, moving on with question 2 in chapter 35. We need to illustrate the effects of the following developments on both the short run and long run Phillips curves. We also need to give the economic reasoning underlying our answers. All right, before we begin, we need to make sure that every time we're being asked to identify development or to evaluate the impact of something, we need to know whether this shock that hits the economy is a supply shock, an aggregate supply shock, an aggregate demand shock, or a structural shock. And after that, we need to see which part of the economy affects and towards what way. Right, so part A says a rise in the natural rate of unemployment. So let's think about it. An increase in the natural rate of unemployment means that this is a structural change, a structural shock. For whatever level of inflation, the unemployment will be higher, and it will be permanently higher because in the long run it will gravitate towards a higher level of employment. So the first thing we know is that the long run Phillips curve right here on the left will shift from LRPC1, LRPC2 will shift to the right. That's one thing that we know for sure. So now it intersects with the x-axis at a higher point, U star prime. The other thing that we also know is that this is, apart from a structural shock, this is also a supply shock, right? Um, if there is a permanent increase in the natural rate of unemployment, this means that for whatever inflation rate, we have uh, a less labor force participation, right? So there is a shock to the supply of labor, one of the factors of production. So the second development is that the short run Phillips curve will also increase from SRPC1, SRPC2 to the right. And this also means that this is also a necessary increase because we need, the question doesn't say anything about inflation. So inflation, we assume it stays the same. So we need the Phillips curve to go up in order to dissect the new long run Phillips curve at the same point, P pi E. All right, part B, we're dealing with a decline in the price of imported oil. So this is quite interesting. Let's think about it. What does this mean? A decline in the price of imported oil is a supply shock, right? It's something that directly affects the costs of productions for firms, and this in turn will affect the choice of the production plan. Also, is it a good one? So we know for sure that the short run Phillips curve will shift. So now, is this a good or a bad shock? Well, the price of oil drops. So what does this mean? That the firms are dealing with a more favorable supply conditions, and so the short run Phillips curve shifts downwards, shifts to the left, right? So we're going from SRPC1, SRPC to right here in the middle graph, and this will coincide with lower rate of inflation, right? For whatever unemployment rate, now inflation is lower because oil is such a significant aspect of production costs. So this is exactly what happens right here. In part C, we need to identify a rise in government spending. All right, we've seen that before in chapter 33 and chapter 34 too. A rise in government spending is what? Is an aggregate demand shock. So no Phillips curve moves in this case. However, the economy moves along the Phillips curve. Here on the right, I've drawn two graphs together to save some space. So here we are SRPC1. We start from point A, which is the long run equilibrium, apparently, and we're going all the way to point B. So rise in government spending stimulates aggregate demand, so we're going to have an expansion of output and a decline in the unemployment rate, so we go to lower unemployment rate, but also to a higher inflation. So this is what happens. We're moving point A to point B along the original short-run Phillips curve. Finally, we need to identify what happens when a decline in expected inflation occurs. Well, this is a major thing, right? Expected inflation, it's all about expected inflation in the short run. And the Phillips curve is all about expected inflation. So since people now expect a lower level of inflation for any given level of unemployment, this means that the short run Phillips curve will have to move downwards so that it dissects the long run Phillips curve at a lower point. So we're going from pi 1e to pi 2e, and this is our final answer.